At 6 in the morning, the first glimmer of pale light had just begun to penetrate the shantytown, and the alley was still filled with the lingering smell of coal stoves from the night before. Liam woke up. He listened for the steady breathing of his mother in the bed next to his, then got up quietly. On the stove, leftover porridge from the night before was covered with old newspaper. He lit the fire, and while waiting for the porridge to heat up, he fished out half a rock-hard steamed bun from the cupboard. This was his breakfast for the day. He wanted to save the money for his lunchbox to buy Fiona a cup of milk tea. Liam! His mother turned over, her voice raspy with sleep. Isn't it the weekend today? Why are you up so early? Yeah, I picked up a last-minute tutoring gig. The kid has an exam coming up soon. Liam stuffed the steamed bun into his mouth and washed it down with a few swallows of cold water, his throat feeling a bit choked. He didn't tell the truth. Tutoring was a weekend afternoon job. The reason he was leaving early was that Fiona had sent a message last night saying, "Don't forget tomorrow at noon." The mother sighed and didn't press further. She knew her son was sensible. Since his freshman year, he had worked as a kitchen helper in a cafeteria, a library shelver, and a tutor. He was like a tireless ant, moving the weight of life bit by bit. He earned his tuition himself and his living expenses too. His mother's meager wages as a cleaner were only enough to cover food for the two of them and the rent for this small room in the shantytown. Liam walked to the door and bent down to tie his sneakers, the soles of which were worn so unevenly that one side was higher than the other. He felt the crack on the inside of the upper that had been glued together, paused for a moment, and put them on anyway. He took a palm-sized red velvet box from the inside pocket of his jacket and tucked it into the deepest layer of his backpack. This was something he had saved 3 months of wages to buy. A thin silver chain with a pendant holding a grain-sized diamond chip. It wasn't from any big brand. He had picked it out after running around 3 malls, and he thought Fiona would look beautiful wearing it. Thinking about how Fiona had coquettishly said on the phone yesterday, "Don't forget my gift." The corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. They had been together for nearly 2 years. She was beautiful and lively, like a beam of light shining into his routine life. He always felt he wasn't good enough for her, so he could only work harder, save a bit more, find a good job after graduation, and he would surely be able to give her a future. Today was her birthday, and he had arranged to meet her at noon at that small restaurant on the high street where they had eaten together for the first time. The place was inexpensive, but Fiona had said the sweet and sour pork ribs there were delicious. It was the autumn of their sophomore year when Liam first saw Emma, in the library. He was working a part-time job at the library at the time, responsible for organizing the bookshelves before closing. That night at 10 o'clock, he was pushing a cart full of books past a table by the window when he saw a girl with a ponytail lying asleep on the table. A textbook, open halfway, was spread out in front of her, and beside it sat a cup of milk tea that had long gone cold. He hesitated for a moment, but instead of waking her, he gently draped his jacket over her shoulders. As he continued organizing the shelves, he glanced back every so often until the closing bell rang. The girl then started awake with a jolt. Rubbing her eyes and seeing the jacket on her shoulders, she paused for a moment, then looked around, lifting her head. Liam stood behind the third row of bookshelves, pretending to look for a book. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her stand up holding a coat, walk to the front desk, and ask the librarian. "Someone draped a coat over me just now. Who was it?" The librarian pointed in the direction of the bookshelves, but Liam had already pushed the book cart into the corner of the aisle. The next noon, Liam was lining up for food in the cafeteria when someone patted him on the shoulder from behind. He turned around and saw the girl with the ponytail, holding a stack of freshly washed coats in her hands, smiling with crescent-shaped eyes. "Senior, here's your coat. Thank you for yesterday. How did you know it was mine? The administrator said you were the only guy organizing the bookshelves last night." She stuffed the jacket into his hand, then pulled a plastic bag out of her pocket. "This is for you too." There were 2 oranges in the plastic bag. "I brought them from home this morning. Here's one for you." With that, she walked away carrying her tray, her ponytail swaying behind her. As she turned, he heard her say to her companion, "That's him, the senior who's always the last to leave the library." Liam looked down at the tangerine in his hand. The skin was green, so it was probably still a bit sour, but he peeled it and ate it anyway. It was indeed sour, sour enough to make him squint, yet the corners of his mouth curled up. At 12 noon, the small restaurant was bustling with noise. Grease mixed with the aroma of stir-fry dishes coated the window glass, and even the light filtering through turned yellow. Liam sat in his usual spot by the window, a cup of free tea that had been refilled 3 times sitting in front of him. He kept checking his phone. Fiona still hadn't replied. At 12:15, Fiona pushed the door open and came in. Today she was wearing exquisite makeup, a new white dress, and her hair had been carefully pinned up, but she glanced at the greasy table and the noisy surroundings, her brow immediately furrowing, and her first words were, "Why did you ask to meet here?" Liam handed her the menu, his smile a bit awkward. "This is the place where we came for the first time. Take a look and see what you want to eat. Today is my treat." Fiona didn't take the menu, instead gently pushing it back with her fingertips. "Whatever. Looking at the menu, there's nothing I really want to eat." Her tone was indifferent. Liam's heart skipped a beat, but he still called the waiter over and ordered 2 home-style dishes she used to love. While waiting for the food, he took out that red velvet box from his backpack and presented it with both hands. "Fiona, happy birthday." Fiona glanced at the box with no brand markings, took it, opened it, and picked up the thin silver chain to look at the pendant. "What brand is this?" "A designer brand at the mall. I think this style really suits you." "How much did it cost?" Fiona interrupted him. Liam's voice dropped. 800. 800. Fiona put the necklace back in the box, closed it, and pushed it back in front of him. "Liam, do you know what my roommate's boyfriend gave her for her birthday? A Tiffany bracelet. Over 10,000. Liam's face flushed instantly. "Fiona, and what about you?" Her voice suddenly rose, and several tables nearby looked over. "A crappy 800 yuan chain? Look at what you're wearing. Look at those shoes on your feet. Look how worn out they are. When will you be able to give me the life I want?" "Fiona, don't talk about this here." Liam lowered his voice and tried to take her hand. Fiona stood up abruptly, kicked her chair, and the metal legs scraped against the floor tiles with a piercing screech. "Why should I go out and say it? I'm telling the truth. Liam, I've had enough. Enough of eating at places like this with you. Enough of being pointed at and talked about when we walk through school. I've had enough." She grabbed her bag and rushed out of the restaurant. Liam froze for 2 seconds before chasing after her, catching her by the arm on the street, only to be violently shaken off. "Let's break up." Fiona turned around, her eyes red. "I've already agreed to Howard's proposal. His father's company has arranged an internship for me, and I can convert to a full-time position after graduation." "Howard." A buzzing sound filled Liam's mind. Howard, the rich second-generation kid in their department who drove a BMW to school and looked down on poor students like him the most. "People like you will never turn your life around." After saying this, Fiona turned around and strode toward the white BMW parked by the roadside. The car door opened, and Howard leaned halfway out, whistling at Liam with undisguised mockery on his face. Liam stood rooted to the spot, watching the white BMW speed away, his fists clenched so tight that his fingernails dug into his palms. At 3 in the afternoon, Liam sat on the river embankment, staring blankly into space. His phone rang. It was his mother calling, her voice sounding somewhat uneasy. "Liam, someone came to the house looking for you just now. They claimed to be a teacher from your school. They were driving a particularly black and large car parked at the entrance of the alley. They left a phone number and said you must call back." Liam felt a knot tighten in his chest and dialed the number. The phone rang twice before connecting, and a steady male voice answered. "Is this Mr. Liam? I am Michael, the secretary to the chairman's office at Huading Group. Chairman George would like to meet you." "Huading Group? The Huading Group of George, the richest man in the Southwest?" Liam thought he had misheard. "Are you sure you have the right person?" "There is no mistake. The chairman is looking for you regarding your mother, Ms. Grace. If it is convenient for you, I am right near your home now." Liam's hand holding the phone trembled slightly. He had never mentioned his mother's name to anyone. He vaguely knew that his mother came from a good background, but she never allowed him to ask. "Okay." When the Rolls-Royce stopped at the entrance of the narrow alley in the shantytown, all the neighbors came out. Mrs. Parker, who was sorting vegetables, Mr. Cooper, who was repairing bicycles, and the children leaning on the windows watching the excitement, their expressions ranging from surprise to utter astonishment. The car didn't drive away. Instead, it made a U-turn and stopped in front of the Lin family's low, single-story house. Michael opened the car door. "Mr. Liam, the chairman is waiting for you inside." Liam pushed open the creaking wooden door. In the dimly lit room, an elderly man with graying hair, dressed in a dark gray bespoke suit and leaning on an ebony cane, was sitting on their worn-out fabric sofa, gazing at a faded family portrait on the wall. His mother stood nearby, her eyes red and swollen. The old man turned and saw Liam, standing up abruptly, his cane nearly slipping from his grip. "Child." His voice was hoarse. "Mom, what on earth is going on?" Grace's tears fell. "Liam, he is your grandfather. Your own grandfather." 20 minutes later, Liam pieced together the truth from his chaotic thoughts. Over 20 years ago, his mother Grace had defied her family's opposition and eloped with his father James, who was then working at a construction site for the Liu family. George flew into a rage and severed ties with his daughter. From then on, his mother changed her name and moved from place to place with his father, working odd jobs. 10 years ago, His father died in a construction site accident, and his mother returned to the city alone with Liam, settling in the shantytown and raising her son by working as a cleaner. George's health began to decline 3 years ago. It wasn't any serious illness, just old age, and his energy was no longer what it used to be. So relatives from the collateral branches of the family started to make their moves. He became increasingly desperate to find his daughter and grandson. It wasn't until last month that a private investigation agency followed up on old leads from James's ID card back then and found this place. Liam. George took a black card from his pocket and placed it on the table. There is 100 million in here. You and your mother have suffered all these years. Liam looked at the thin card, then at his mother's red, swollen eyes. He thought of Fiona's resolute back as she walked away at noon today, and of the figure of his mother leaving the house at 4:30 every morning for the past 10 years. After a long silence, he raised his head. Grandfather, I'll go back to the Liu family with you. It's not for the money. It's so my mom doesn't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning anymore. It's to let those who look down on us know that they were wrong. A smile blossomed on George's aged face as he patted him on the shoulder. Good. From today on, you are the heir of the Liu family. The evening sunset shone through the broken window, gilding the three of them in gold. Liam walked to the window and saw that his grandfather's entourage had already carried 2 suitcases into the room. His grandfather had said that temporary accommodation and a change of clothes were prepared at the Liu residence, and they would move over tonight. He looked down at the peeling sports shoes on his feet, thinking that starting tomorrow, he might need to change into a new pair. At the same time, inside a private room at a high-end restaurant, Fiona held onto Howard's arm, dining with a group of second-generation rich kids to celebrate her birthday. On the table sat an open bottle of red wine and exquisite dishes. Fiona, what did that ex-boyfriend of yours get you? A girl asked. Fiona pouted. A crappy necklace worth $800, some off-brand from the mall. It was hilarious. Howard put his arm around her and laughed heartily. A pauper will never turn their life around. Fiona, stick with me from now on, and you can pick out whatever you want at Tiffany's. The private room filled with sycophantic laughter. Fiona's phone lit up. It was a notification from a post. A senior had posted a photo. A Rolls-Royce parked in an alley in the shantytown, with the caption, "Oh my God! A Huading Group car parked in the shantytown. What's going on?" Fiona was about to casually swipe past it, but her hand froze. In the corner of the photo, a blurry figure was getting out of the car. That silhouette, that faded denim jacket, those worn-out sneakers with peeling soles, it was Liam. The phone slapped onto the table. The senior's next message immediately popped up. I heard Chairman George has found his long-lost grandson. Apparently his surname is Lin. A loud buzz went off in Fiona's mind, leaving it completely blank. At 8:30 p.m., the headquarters of Huading Group, Fiona stood in the magnificent hall, feeling like an intruder who had stumbled into another world. The receptionist asked for her appointment, and her voice trembled as she said, I'm his girlfriend. We met just this afternoon. The receptionist dialed the internal line and hung up a moment later. Mr. Liam asks you to go up. The elevator goes directly to the top floor. As the elevator doors opened, Fiona saw the night view of the entire city through the floor-to-ceiling window. Liam stood with his back to her before the window, dressed in a dark gray suit with sharp shoulder lines, prepared in advance by his entourage and delivered. He turned around, his face calm. Fiona. Her tears fell without warning, and she rushed over to grab his sleeve. Liam, I was wrong. I didn't mean any of those things. I still love you. Liam didn't dodge, but he didn't respond either. He simply waited for her to finish before gently removing her hand. Fiona, you say you love me. What exactly do you love about me? Do you love that worn-out jacket I was wearing at noon? Or these holy shoes on my feet? Do you love that $800 necklace? Or my bank card with only $300 left after paying rent this month? Fiona parted her lips, and her tears flowed even harder. I just feel like you don't try hard enough. I don't try hard enough? Liam gave a faint laugh. I get up at 6 in the morning, get back to the dorm at midnight, and work 3 tutoring jobs on weekends. You know all of this. You just think my efforts are pointless. Because you never believed that someone like me could have any future. He walked to the desk, picked up the black card, and twirled it. There's 100 million in here. My grandfather gave it to me as pocket money. Fiona's eyes involuntarily lit up as they followed the card. It was almost an instinctive reaction. Liam saw it. If I said I wanted nothing right now, and still lived in the shantytown, still wore worn-out shoes, and lived the way I used to, he looked at her. Would you be willing? Fiona's lips moved, but she didn't say the words, I do. The silence was answer enough. Liam walked to the door and opened it for her. You should go. Don't come back. Fiona stood there, trembling all over. She remembered the winter of their freshman year, when Liam had taken off his only thick coat and given it to her. his lips turning purple from the cold yet still smiling. Back then she had been moved, feeling that although he was poor, he treated her well. When did it change? Maybe when her roommates came back to the dorm carrying new bags. Maybe when she saw other girls showing off lipstick gift sets. Or maybe it was just that, day after day, she felt that his kindness could no longer fill the hollow in her heart. She didn't say another word, turned around, and rushed into the elevator. Downstairs, Howard's car was parked by the roadside, his face grim. Fiona didn't speak after getting in. Her tears had streaked her makeup. Howard didn't offer any comfort either, starting the car in silence. They returned to his rented luxury apartment in silence the whole way. That night, Fiona lay on the wide bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep, the photo replaying over and over in her mind. At 3 in the morning, she turned on her phone. The post about the Rolls-Royce in the shantytown had already gone viral. Some people had captured photos of George's motorcade, while others had snapped a side profile of Liam helping his mother into the car. With every swipe, her heart sank another inch. She suddenly thought of that necklace she had despised. She had tossed it carelessly onto the restaurant table at the time, and she didn't know if Liam had picked it up later. At that moment, she reached out and touched Howard's nightstand. Inside the drawer were several boxes of unopened luxury brand jewelry, all bought casually by Howard, who hadn't even bothered to open the boxes. She suddenly felt that compared to that 800 yuan necklace, these things were weightless, as if they were made of plastic. She opened her WeChat chat with Liam. The last conversation had been yesterday, when she said, "Remember to bring a gift tomorrow or I'll be mad." And he replied, "Don't worry, I guarantee you'll be satisfied," followed by 2 emojis. She stared at those emojis for a long time, typing and deleting words in the input box over and over again, and finally sent nothing. Early the next morning, while Howard was still asleep, she changed her clothes, went out, took the bus and headed to the small restaurant. The roller shutter was half pulled down, and the owner was wiping the tables, preparing ingredients for the midday service. She stood at the door hesitating for several minutes before mustering the courage to push the door open and go inside. "Boss, yesterday around noon there was a guy sitting by the window. When he left, did he leave a small red box on the table?" The owner looked up at her, turned around, and fished out a red velvet box from under the counter. The water stains on it had dried, and the velvet surface was a bit stiff. "You mean this one? The young man didn't take it when he left, so I kept it." "Go ahead, miss, you can take it." Fiona took the box, holding it in her hand. The box was very light, yet her palm felt heavy. She thanked him and walked out of the restaurant. Standing by the roadside, she opened the box. Inside lay the thin silver chain quietly, and the scattered diamond on the pendant glinted once in the sunlight. She stared at that scattered diamond for a long time, then closed the lid and put it into the innermost compartment of her bag. Meanwhile, in the top-floor office, Liam was sitting in George's study that night, with a stack of Huading Group's financial reports for the past 3 years spread out before him. George tapped one of them. "There's a situation with the land in the West City. Take a look at it first, then tell me your thoughts." Just as Liam opened the file, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. "Liam, I saw your name on the list for the president's office. I'm so happy for you. Let me show you around tomorrow." It was followed by a sticker of a little bear holding a banner. Looking at that goofy bear, the corners of Liam's mouth curled up unconsciously. Emma was a junior in the same department 1 year below him. He remembered how she used to save him a seat in the library, share fruit with him and bring him steamed buns. When he asked why she helped him, she said, "Because you always look so tired, and it was no trouble." At the time, he didn't think much of it and just thought she was kind-hearted. Later, he found out that her father had been laid off early and her mother was in poor health. She had started earning her own living expenses since her sophomore year. She had a hard life, but there was never a look of bitterness on her face. He replied to her, "Okay, see you tomorrow." The little bear on the screen was smiling, and so was he. During Liam's first week at Huading Group, he arrived at the office at 8 every morning, while Emma was half an hour earlier. But every morning when he pushed open the office door, there was a cup of soy milk and a steamed bun on his desk, weighed down by a torn-off sticky note with Emma's round, chubby handwriting. "The buns in the cafeteria today are pork and scallion. You said you liked them last time. I added sugar to the soy milk. I don't know how sweet you like it. If it's too sweet, I'll put less in tomorrow. The temperature has dropped today. Remember to grab an umbrella from the front desk." The sticky note on the third day featured a crooked little bear holding up the words, "Go for it." Liam put those sticky notes in his drawer instead of throwing them away. One day he arrived particularly early, getting there at 7:10. When he pushed open the office door, he saw Emma with her back to the door, bending over to place soy milk and buns on his desk. She was wearing a light yellow sweatshirt, her hair casually tied up in a bun, a slice of toast in her mouth, and she was hurriedly smoothing down a sticky note. He stood silently at the door, watching her finish everything and turn around. And then their eyes met. The toast in Emma's mouth nearly fell out. You? Why are you here so early today? Liam leaned against the doorframe, a smile on his lips. I wanted to see who's been secretly feeding me every morning. Emma's face flushed red instantly. She grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. I'm gonna clock in. Bye. As she passed him, he gently tugged at the hood of her hoodie. Thanks, he said, his voice flat but his eyes were smiling. Emma ran without looking back, her muffled response echoing down the hallway. You're welcome. The last syllable drifted away. The next morning at 9 o'clock, in the Huading Group conference room. As Liam walked in, the eyes of over 20 executives fell on him in unison. Jason, third from the left, his nominal cousin-in-law, the son of George's late brother, who had been deeply entrenched in the group for over a decade, wore a polite smile, but the amusement in his eyes was cold. After George briefly introduced him, polite but sparse applause rippled through the conference room. Let's get down to business. George looked at Jason. There's a problem with the West City land. You tell them. Jason stood up, his tone composed. The rock formations at the main building site are complex, so foundation treatment will require at least an additional $300 million. The current options are either to increase investment and push through, or to halt construction and cut losses. Personally, I lean toward the former. Liam flipped through the materials, his gaze pausing on a gray area next to the planning map. Former site of Shinglong Textile Factory. Acquired. Mr. Jason, he spoke up, interrupting. Do we hold the title to that textile factory site next door? The conference room fell silent for a moment. Jason, having been interrupted, looked briefly displeased but still smiled. Yes, Mr. Liam. It hasn't been planned for yet. Liam stood up, walked over to the planning map, picked up a marker, and drew a circle around the textile factory plot. Since the main building site has poor geological conditions, why not move the commercial complex over here? Convert the original site into a multi-level underground parking garage and a logistics center. The West District lacks parking spaces, and the surrounding e-commerce businesses need warehousing. This fills both gaps. The bedrock actually makes for stable underground space, and the ground-bearing capacity of the textile factory site is sufficient. He clicked the pen cap shut. The conference room fell silent for 5 seconds. Then Gordon, the director of engineering, abruptly stood up, walked over to the diagram and studied it closely for a few minutes. When he looked up, his eyes were lit up. This approach, it's actually feasible. It'll save at least $200 million. The conference room instantly erupted into chaos. Jason stood rooted to the spot, his smile frozen. The contingency plan he had spent half a month preparing was stuck in his throat. George rapped on the table. Draft a new proposal based on this direction. After the meeting, Jason paused as he passed Liam, a glint of malice flashing through his eyes, but it was quickly concealed by his lowered eyelids. Liam saw it, but he didn't pay it any mind. The meeting ended, and a girl with a ponytail wearing a white shirt walked up quickly, beaming. Mr. Liam, let me show you around and get you familiar with the environment. Emma held a small notebook, filled with dense notes on the locations and functions of every department. Liam followed her up 2 floors, watching as she gave a meticulous introduction. This floor is the marketing department, responsible for branding and investment attraction. Over there is the legal department. They're currently handling a property rights case for a plot in the south of the city. You wrote down so much? Liam asked. Clumsy birds have to fly first. She looked a bit embarrassed. I'm an intern. If I don't prepare enough, I'm afraid I'll make mistakes. At noon in the cafeteria, Emma came over carrying her tray. Seeing only vegetables and rice in Liam's tray, she blinked and asked, You're eating so simply? Just a habit. Liam said it before realizing that starting yesterday he didn't need to save anymore. But that habit still clung to him like the worn tread on the soles of his shoes. Emma didn't press further. She picked up a chicken leg from her plate and put it in his bowl. I'm on a diet. Help me finish this. Liam smiled at the extra chicken leg in his bowl and didn't decline. During the time the West City project was being replanned, Liam often worked late into the night. One night at 9:30, he was still in the office going through documents when there were 2 knocks on the door. Emma poked her head in. You're still here? Yeah, there's still some stuff to look through. She didn't say anything else. After a quarter of an hour, she came back, holding 2 bowls of instant noodles. She placed one on his desk and held the other as she sat on the sofa. I'll keep you company. Liam looked at the steaming bowl of instant noodles. You're not going back? The dorms don't close until 11, so there's still an hour and a half. She broke apart the chopsticks, slurped a mouthful of noodles and said muffledly, You get back to work. I'll just look at my phone here. I won't disturb you. Liam didn't refuse and lowered his head to eat the instant noodles. The noodles tasted very ordinary, But he remembered that night particularly clearly. Emma sitting on the sofa, the light from her phone screen illuminating her face. She would occasionally look up at him, and discovering that he was looking at her too, she would hurriedly lower her head, pretending to scroll through her phone, the tips of her ears slowly turning red. At 10:40, Liam closed the documents and stood up. "Let's go. I'll drive you back." No need. I'll take the bus. The last bus is gone at this hour." He picked up his jacket. "I drove here." That black business van was assigned to him by his grandfather, and he wasn't quite used to driving it yet. Emma sat in the passenger seat, and after fastening her seatbelt, she was quiet for a moment before suddenly saying, "You drive quite steadily." "Nervous. A little bit," she admitted honestly. "It's my first time riding in a car you're driving." Liam laughed. "Don't worry. I've had my driver's license for 3 years. Took 3 years. I failed twice in the middle." Emma laughed and curled up in her seat. "Then I'd better get a little nervous." When they arrived at the dormitory building, Emma paused as she unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to look at him. "Liam, you don't really have to work overtime every time. You just got here. You can take things slowly." "I know." He gripped the steering wheel. "But I want to find my footing quickly." Emma looked at him for a moment, then said, "Then I'll bring you soy milk tomorrow morning too." "No sugar." "Why?" "The last cup was too sweet." Emma mumbled. "I clearly only put in 1.5 spoonfuls." Then pushed the door open and got out of the car. Before running into the dormitory building, she turned back and waved at him. Liam sat in the car, watching her figure disappear into the distance, and smiled for a long time in the dark. A week later, Jason sent over the acquisition proposal for the City South land parcel. It was written in flowery language, suggesting a starting bid of $500 million and recommending securing it for $600 million, claiming a turnaround profit of several hundred million. However, when Liam went through it for the third time, he noticed that a legal opinion was missing from the attachments. He called Gordon. "Gordon, help me look into the ownership status of that City South land privately." Gordon fell silent for a few seconds, then lowered his voice. "I was just about to talk to you about that. That land has been seized. The original owner is involved in a fraud case, and the ownership rights still haven't been clarified. If you buy it, it will be tied up in disputes for at least a year or two, and several hundred million will be locked down." "Does Mr. Jason know about this?" "He is in charge of investment and expansion. There is no way he doesn't know." Liam hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair. So Jason was waiting for him right here with his gifts and fawning. If Liam were to approve a project that would lose hundreds of millions right after taking office, would his position as heir still be secure? He dialed his grandfather's office number. 3 days later, at the senior executive meeting, Jason stood up again to pitch the South City project. With great emotion, he finally looked at Liam. "Mr. Liam, do you think we should bring this to a meeting for a decision as soon as possible?" All eyes turned to Liam once again. Liam stood up and walked to the projection screen, taking a document from his pocket and placing it on it. A screenshot of the court seizure notice appeared on the screen, with the case number and date clearly visible. "Mr. Jason is right. The location of this land is indeed excellent, but it was seized half a year ago, and the original owner's fraud case is still under trial. It will take at least 1 to 2 years to confirm the rights before auction, during which $600 million in funds will be tied up, with interest amounting to tens of millions per year. Did you know about these circumstances beforehand?" Jason turned pale. I only just found out myself. You were responsible for investment and expansion, and the report didn't identify property rights risks." Liam's tone was not heavy. "Is this a work error, or is there some other reason?" George tapped the table lightly. "Jason, go on administrative leave. Come to my office to discuss the details." Jason, pale as a sheet, sat back down. As the meeting ended, he paused for a moment when passing by Liam but said nothing. Liam knew this man had deep roots. A suspension wouldn't truly hurt him. There would be more moves to come, but he wasn't afraid. He was even a little expectant. That evening, upon returning to the Liu residence, his mother brought in a bowl of hot soup. She sat by the bed in silence for a while before speaking. "Liam, are you tired today?" "It's all right. Mom didn't let you ask about family matters before because she was afraid it would be a burden. Now that your grandfather has found you, Mom is even more worried. The Liu family is so large, with so many people and complicated matters." Liam interrupted her. "Mom, when you used to go to the market at 4:30 in the morning to help unload goods, did I ever tell you not to go?" His mother paused for a moment. "You told me back then that no matter how hard life gets, someone has to shoulder the burden." Liam smiled. "Now it's my turn." His mother said nothing more, patted him on the shoulder, and walked out. Liam picked up the bowl of warm soup, drank it, and went back to flipping through his book. Over at Howard's, things were spiraling in a way he hadn't expected. Someone had snapped a photo of him whistling at Liam that day and posted it to the alumni group, paired with the caption, "Howard mocks the Liu family grandson in the street." The image circulated through several rounds of the local business circles. That night, his father David summoned him home and tore into him. "Have you lost your mind? Of all people, you had to provoke the Liu family? With this stunt, all they have to do is cross our name off a supplier list, and we'll be out on the street." Howard sat on the couch with a sullen face, keeping silent. The fire inside him burned hotter, but he couldn't say whether it was directed at Liam or at himself. What made him even more uncomfortable was Fiona's change. Ever since she came back that night, she had been absent-minded, and sometimes her gaze drifted far away when she looked at him. In the past, her eyes would light up when she coaxed him for bags or lipstick. Now she just gave a casual "it's all right," barely even glancing at him. He woke up in the middle of the night to find her scrolling on her phone with her back to him, the screen light illuminating her profile, her expression hard to read as either sad or empty. He reached out to hold her, but she dodged slightly. It was a very slight movement, but Howard's hand froze in mid-air, taking a long moment to pull back. 3 weeks after Jason was suspended, an anonymous package was delivered to Liam's office containing several printed screenshots of chat logs. A conversation between Jason and an unidentified intermediary. It mentioned things like, "We can create some public pressure over in West City, and get an outsider to handle it. Don't implicate the group." When Liam flipped to the third page, he saw a familiar name, the outside executor mentioned by the intermediary. He checked the contact number, and it matched the private number of an employee at Howard's father's company. Liam put the screenshots in his drawer and kept quiet. He hadn't figured out how to use this lead yet, but he knew keeping it would be more useful than exposing it right now. Trouble arose when the West City project reached the construction phase. On Friday afternoon, Gordon walked in, showing Liam a photo on his phone screen. Red graffiti on the construction hoarding that read, "Heartless developer. Return my hard-earned money." That same day, flyers started appearing in the surrounding residential areas, claiming that Huading had forcibly acquired land and deducted compensation. Liam looked at the photo and then at the content of the flyer, asking, "Did the surveillance cameras catch anyone?" Wearing a hoodie and a mask, his face couldn't be seen clearly. The flyers were printed roughly, but several hundred were handed out. "Has the demolition sign-up ledger been compiled yet?" "It's being compiled. Also, help me find 2 demolition households willing to speak out, and bring copies of the signed agreements." Gordon nodded and left. That evening, Emma sent a screenshot. A post titled, "Huading Group bullies people. Demolition households' tearful accusations" had appeared on a local forum, accompanied by blurry photos, followed by dozens of emotional comments. She added, "It's on several platforms, and the content is identical. There's also an account ID that looks familiar. I think I've seen it in Howard's posts before." Liam stared at the message for a few seconds, recalling the anonymous chat records in the drawer. If Howard was being used as a pawn by Jason, that would make sense. Howard had a motive for revenge, and Jason needed someone to create public pressure without getting his own hands dirty. But he didn't do anything immediately. The next afternoon, the 3 demolition households Gordon had brought. One of them, Uncle Joe, had been a street office official before retiring. Looked at the post and slammed the table on the spot. "Nonsense. We all received compensation according to the standards when we signed the agreements. I still have copies here." That evening, a clarification statement signed by 3 relocated residents was posted on a local forum, featuring a partial photo of the signed agreement and accompanied by a simple message. "We've lived here for 30 years, and we haven't received a penny less than we were entitled to. We've never encountered what's described on the flyers." 2 hours after the post went up, the tide began to turn. Someone dug up that the posting account was a burner, and its IP address matched that of a suspicious ad post. Immediately after, Emma sent another link. On the back of the flyer was printed a small advertisement. The legal representative of the small company renting out construction barriers listed there was a nominal employee of Howard's building materials company. A screenshot of the business registration information made it crystal clear. Liam zoomed in on that screenshot and studied it for a long time. The chain of evidence was still missing one link to completely pin it on Jason, but the connection to Howard was already glaringly obvious. He asked Gordon, "Are the flyers still being distributed?" "No one has been distributing them since this morning." "All right, let's leave it at that for now." At the same time, Howard was being scolded in his father's company office. David slammed his phone onto the desk. The screen displayed a post exposing the registration information of that small company. "Speak! What on earth are you doing?" Howard stiffened his neck. "I just couldn't swallow that." "Can't swallow it? You can't swallow it. Yet all they have to do is lift a finger and our family is done for. Do you think that person named Lou at Huading Group won't trace this back to you?" David was shaking with anger. "You stay put and behave yourself. If you cause any more trouble, I'll cut off all your cards." Howard clenched his fists and walked out of the office, slamming the car door with a loud bang. He sat in the driver's seat for a while, catching his breath before starting the car, his mind in complete chaos. His phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. After connecting, a man's voice came through, indifferent. "Mr. Howard, you had better stop what you're doing on your end. Someone is already investigating." "Who are you?" "You don't need to worry about who I am. Someone knows what you've done, but it hasn't been brought out into the open yet. If you're smart, you'll wipe everything clean and leave no loose ends." The line went dead on the other end. Howard gripped his phone, his palm sweating. He suddenly realized he might have been used as a pawn. That middleman who had proactively contacted him to take down Liam had a voice he didn't recognize at all, and had only said, "Someone is paying for the job, you don't need to ask who." At the time, he just felt he had an ally with a common enemy. Looking back now, he didn't even know what the other person looked like. He deleted the middleman's contact information and ordered his subordinates to take down all the forum posts. His hands trembled as he did these things, with only one thought in his mind: don't get his family involved. Fiona didn't find out about these matters until that evening. She saw Howard looking grim all day, and when she asked him, he wouldn't say anything, just sitting on the sofa scrolling through his phone until midnight. She walked over and glanced at the screen. It was the business registration screenshot that had been dug up, prominently displaying the Zhang family's associated information. "Are you helping someone with the West City project?" Fiona asked, her voice flat. Howard didn't look at her. "Stay out of it. Have you lost your mind?" Fiona's voice finally showed a hint of fluctuation. "What's the point of going after him? He doesn't need to do anything. Just the fact that he's from the Liu family." "I know." Howard looked up abruptly. "You don't need to remind me. You were with me when I had more money than him, and now that he's richer, you regret it, right? Go find him then." Fiona froze. She looked at Howard's face, twisted by anger, and suddenly felt as though she were watching this scene as a stranger. She couldn't speak, so she turned and went into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. She slid down the door to sit slowly on the floor, rummaging through her bag to pull out that red velvet box and clutching it in her palm. The velvet surface of the box had gone slightly fuzzy from all her touching. She didn't turn on the light. She just sat there in the dark, clutching that $800 necklace, for a long time. A week after the controversy had died down, George mentioned over dinner. Jason called today to apologize. He said his people didn't know any better, and he's dealt with it. Liam didn't stop serving himself food. George glanced at him. "Aren't you going to ask if I believe it? Whether he admits it or not doesn't matter. What matters is that the West City project wasn't affected," Liam said. He thought for a moment, deciding not to tell his grandfather about the anonymous chat logs and the shell companies. The evidence wasn't solid enough yet, and bringing it up would only put his grandfather in a difficult spot. George smiled and didn't press further. It was on a late night of overtime that Emma learned the rough outline of the inside story. After helping Liam organize the work schedule for the next quarter, the two of them sat in the empty conference room, munching on takeout. She hesitated for a moment before asking, "That flyer incident, was it really Howard who did it? Someone used him to do it." Liam took a sip of tea without elaborating. Emma was silent for a while before saying, "He used to love giving you a hard time back in school. I remember he even deliberately knocked you down during the sophomore basketball game." Liam paused for a moment. "You remember?" "Of course I remember. Your knee was scraped, and I was the one who found you a Band-Aid." Emma smiled. "Back then I thought, why does this person always bully you?" Liam lowered his head to glance at his knee. That scar had long since faded to the point of being invisible, but he still remembered Emma squatting by the side of the court handing him a Band-Aid, the sunset hitting her from the side, casting a layer of warm light over her hair. "Later, every time I saw you, you were working," Emma said. "The library, the cafeteria, tutoring. I thought you were especially tired, but I never heard you complain." Liam looked at her. "You saved seats for me and shared fruit back then just because of this?" Emma lowered her head to take a bite of food and mumbled, "Not entirely. Anyway, it was just convenient." The tips of her ears turned a bit red. Liam didn't press further, but that night when he got home from working overtime until 11, his mood was noticeably lighter than usual. During the West City public opinion storm, Liam stayed up 3 nights in a row. When he got up on the 4th morning, his voice was hoarse and his head felt heavy. He didn't think much of it and went to the office as usual. But when Emma came over with her tray at noon, she glanced at his face and immediately set the tray down. "Do you have a fever?" "No, just a bit tired." Emma reached out to feel his forehead, frowning when the back of her hand touched his skin. "Wait here." She ran off. 10 minutes later, she returned with a box of fever reducers, a packet of cold medicine, and a cup of hot water. She placed the medicine and the packet in front of him. "Take these. I still have a meeting this afternoon." "How can you hold a meeting in this state?" "I'll talk to Gordon and get it postponed." She used a tone that brooked no argument, pulling him up by the arm. "Come on, let's go back to the office and rest. I'll make you some medicine." Liam was half pushed, half dragged back to the office by her, settled onto the sofa, and wrapped in a blanket. He was indeed feverish and a bit dazed. Leaning against the sofa back, he watched Emma bustling about boiling water, mixing the medicine, and testing the temperature, all the while muttering, "You really don't know how to take care of yourself." He laughed with his eyes closed. "You sound just like my mom." Emma shoved the cup into his hand. "Shut up and drink your medicine." The meeting that afternoon was indeed postponed. Liam woke up from a nap to find Emma sitting on the small chair beside him, a book spread open on her lap, head tilted to the side, fast asleep. She was still clutching the empty medicine cup in her hand, with traces of undissolved powder on her fingernails. Liam didn't wake her. He just leaned back on the sofa, gazing at her drooping eyelashes and watching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window turn her hair a warm brown. He suddenly felt that this kind of life was actually quite good. That evening, as he was driving her home, they remained silent in the car for a long time. Then, just before a red light, he spoke. "Emma. I'll treat you to dinner once I'm done with this busy spell. Just the two of us." Emma glanced at him. The streetlights slid in through the car window, flickering on her face. She made a sound of, "Oh," then said, "Then I want something expensive." "Sure. The really expensive kind. Anything goes." She didn't speak again, but Liam saw from the corner of his eye that she turned her face toward the car window, the glass reflecting a corner of her mouth that couldn't help but curling upward. That very expensive meal was delayed for 3 weeks before finally happening. Liam chose a Western restaurant by the river. Emma sat by the window, watching the lights outside reflected on the river surface, and was quiet for a rare moment. "Nervous?" Liam asked her. "A little," she said honestly. "It's the first time you've treated me to such an expensive meal, so I keep feeling like you're going to say something big." Liam smiled and didn't answer directly. After dinner, the two of them took a walk along the riverside. The autumn wind was already turning chilly, and Emma shrank her neck. Liam took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him, and his expression was very serious. "Emma," he said, "I want to tell you something." "Go ahead." "I used to live in a shantytown, wear worn-out shoes, earn 80 yuan from a tutoring session, and only order one dish in the cafeteria. That's what I was like when you met me." He looked into her eyes. "Back then you saved seats for me, shared fruit with me, and brought me steamed buns, but I never asked you why." Emma opened her mouth, only to be silenced by his next words. "I want to ask now." The river breeze blew her hair across her face. She didn't brush it aside. She just looked at him. "Because I like you." She said it softly but very decisively. Liam paused for a moment. "Starting from that time in our sophomore year when you draped your jacket over me in the library." Emma turned her head to look at the river, her voice a bit steadier than before. "Later, seeing you so busy and so tired, I just wanted to help you a little more. You asked me why I helped you, and I said it was just convenient, but that was actually a lie. I was too embarrassed to say it back then." She turned back to him, her face flushed by the wind, but her gaze didn't waver. "So I've always known what kind of person you are. Whether it's the guy from the shantytown or the president of Huading, it's all you. The one I like is that senior from the very beginning who put his jacket on me and was freezing himself but wouldn't admit it." Liam stood by the river, the night wind filling his shirt, but he didn't feel cold. He looked at her for a long time, then reached out to tuck her wind-blown hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, and she trembled slightly when his fingertips brushed against her ear. "Let me ask you something," he said. "Do you still like it?" Emma looked up at him. The lights from the opposite bank reflected in her eyes, incredibly bright. "Guess." Liam lowered his head and chuckled, then reached out to pull her, coat and all, into his arms. Emma's head bumped against his chest, letting out a muffled peach, before she slowly relaxed, resting her forehead against his chin, her voice becoming very soft. "Your coat still smells like laundry detergent. It's quite nice." "That's your scent," he said. "I noticed it when you gave it back to me last time." Emma chuckled softly in his arms. "You're observing so carefully?" He tightened his arms slightly. "Because it's you." The wind by the river was still blowing, but she no longer felt cold. After making their relationship official, there were some new things in Liam's life that hadn't been there before. For instance, every morning when Emma arrived at the office, she would place a cup of coffee on his desk. She had even gone to learn how to make pour-over coffee specifically because he had said, "Black coffee tastes better." The first cup was so sour that he frowned. She stood nearby, watching him nervously. "How is it?" "It's all right." He set down the cup. "Try making the water a bit hotter tomorrow." "You're actually critiquing it now." She walked off in a huff, and the coffee she brought the next day was indeed more fragrant. "For instance, Whenever he worked past 10 o'clock, Emma would send a message. "When will you be done? I'll be waiting for you in the lobby downstairs. You don't have to wait for me. Go back first. I'm just checking my phone. It's no trouble." She said this every time, and whenever Liam packed up and went downstairs, he would always find her sitting on the sofa in the lobby, the light from her phone screen illuminating her face, with a cup of warm milk she had brought for him placed beside her. For instance, once Liam was in a meeting until 8 in the evening. When he came out, he found Emma asleep on a chair outside the conference room, clutching an unopened bag of cookies in her hand, with a sticky note that read, "Didn't want you to get hungry, but I ended up falling asleep first." He crouched down to look at her sleeping profile for a long time, then gently took the cookies from her hand, draped his jacket over her, and sat beside her waiting for her to wake up. For instance, she would suddenly send a photo of a cat squatting on a roadside flower bed basking in the sun. "Doesn't it look like you when you work overtime until the early hours? How is it like me? The way your eyes can barely stay open is very similar." For instance, on a weekend he accompanied her to the flower and bird market. She picked out a succulent and a cactus, insisting he carry them the whole way, saying, "You look good holding them." He walked through the crowd holding the 2 pots of greenery, while she walked ahead, glancing back at him from time to time, smiling like a child who had stolen candy. That evening at dusk, they sat on a park bench. Emma rested her head on his shoulder, twirling a fallen leaf in her fingers. "Liam, how long do you think we can stay together?" "I don't know. Can't you say something nice?" "Then let it be a long time," he said. Emma let out a humph, but leaned her head a little tighter against his shoulder. "Now that's more like it." A month later, the agreement for Huading Group and the national commercial brand to move in was signed. There were 6 rounds of negotiations and 4 revisions to the proposal, and the other side even changed their lead negotiator at the last minute. Liam and his team stayed up until 2 in the morning preparing rebuttal materials, and the next day, they refuted every single one of the other side's objections point by point. The moment the contract was signed, Gordon gave his shoulder a firm pat. He didn't say anything, but that smile said it all. A week later at the board meeting, George formally announced Liam's appointment as president of Huading Group, fully responsible for core business operations. Liam stood at the front looking at the faces below, Gordon clapping with genuine sincerity, middle-level managers with complex expressions behind their smiles, and a few veteran directors lowering their heads to flip through documents, their emotions unreadable. George sat in the main seat, his aged fingers rubbing the top of his cane. He waited for the applause to fade before speaking a single sentence. "The road is still long. Only with the step steady today is there a path to walk tomorrow." Liam nodded. "Grandfather, I understand." That night, as he left the building and passed through the lobby, he saw a figure in a gray trench coat standing on the steps outside. Fiona looked thinner and wore no makeup, clutching that red velvet box in her hand. She called out to him, "Liam." Liam paused for a moment before walking out. "What is it?" Fiona handed over the box. "This? Here. Take it back." "I didn't take it at the time. I left it on the restaurant floor. Later I went to look for it, and the owner had kept it. I was passing by today and thought I should return it to you." She didn't say that she had gone to the restaurant twice to get it. The first time the owner wasn't there, and the second time she stood in front of the rolling shutter for 5 minutes before pushing the door open. Nor did she mention that she had gripped the box the entire way until her palms were sweating. Liam took the box and gave it a squeeze. "I don't have a habit of taking back things I've given away. If you don't want it, just throw it away." Fiona bit her lip. "I didn't throw it away. I just felt I shouldn't have spoken about it like that. It's actually quite nice." Liam looked at her, suddenly feeling as though the person before him and the girl who had screamed about a crappy 800 yuan chain a month ago were separated by a layer of frosted glass. The outline was still there, but the details were blurred. "Are you still living at Howard's?" Fiona was silent for a moment before saying softly, "I moved out. He hasn't been coming home much lately. There's a lot going on at the company. We had a talk, and he said he was feeling troubled and didn't want to see me, so I said I'd move out. He didn't ask me to stay." Liam didn't respond. He could hear the hollow exhaustion in her tone. But sympathy and old feelings are 2 different things. "I have plans tonight," he said. "You should head back early." He turned to leave. "Liam." Fiona called him from behind, her voice soft. "I'm sorry." Liam paused for a moment, didn't look back, and kept walking forward. Fiona stood in the twilight, lowered her head to look at the box in her hand, and put it back into the inner pocket of her coat. Before coming, she had thought of many ways to start the conversation, thought about what to do if he was cold, and wondered whether she should return the necklace to just end things completely. But when she actually stood there, she realized none of her assumptions had been used. She turned and walked toward the bus stop, walking neither quickly nor looking back again. Liam got into his car, and his phone rang. It was Emma. Have you arrived? I just passed a flower shop and saw a particularly beautiful succulent. Do you want me to put one in your office? Put out two. Put one in your office too. Okay, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. After hanging up the phone, Liam started the car and drove into the night. Fiona's figure in the rearview mirror grew smaller and eventually disappeared. He took one look and then averted his gaze. A week later, Liam took Emma home to meet his mother. His mother held Emma's hand, asking this and that for over an hour. Liam sat nearby making tea, watching Emma's ears turn red as she answered the questions earnestly. While Emma was in the bathroom, his mother whispered, "This girl is good. She's down to earth." Liam smiled. "Yeah, I know." Emma was so nervous that she started picking out her outfit 3 days in advance. When Liam came to pick her up at her dorm, she was still agonizing over what to wear. "What color does your mom like? I shouldn't wear anything too flashy, right? Should I bring a gift? Is fruit enough? Or should I buy an extra box of pastries?" Liam sat on her small bed in the dorm watching her turn her closet inside out, and couldn't help but laugh. "You weren't this nervous when you brought me steamed buns last year. How is that the same? That was bringing them for a senior. This is for—" She stopped, and the tips of her ears quickly turned red. Liam stood up, walked over to her, took the light blue shirt she had been agonizing over from her hand, and put it back in the closet. "Just wear your usual white sweater. Are you sure?" "Sure." He lowered his head to straighten her collar. "Once my mom sees you in person, she'll like you." Emma looked up at him and asked softly, "What about you? What if your mom doesn't like me?" "That's not an option." "You're that sure?" Liam looked at her. "Because whoever I choose, my mom will definitely like." Emma blushed, lowered her head, and muttered smooth talker before asking anything more. On the day they were to meet his parents, his mother prepared a huge spread for lunch. Emma sat at the table at first not knowing where to put her hands, but his mother's first question wasn't about income or family background. Instead, she asked, "Emma, you mentioned last time that you like spicy food, so I added 2 dried chili peppers today. Give it a try and see if it's salty enough." Emma paused for a moment, then felt a lump in her throat. She lowered her head and took a bite of the food. It was so spicy that her eyes reddened. Yet she smiled and said, "It's delicious, Auntie, really delicious." His mother smiled and served her another portion, and while Emma was eating with her head down, she winked at Liam. The meaning was clear. She's a keeper, she's the one. Liam lightly touched Emma's knee under the table. She looked up at him, and he mouthed, "Don't be nervous." She kicked him, but the corners of her mouth stayed curled up. 2 months later, Jason submitted his resignation. Rumor had it that the company he had started on the outside had secured funding, and he had voluntarily withdrawn from the group's power struggle. On the day Liam received the resignation, he sat in his office for a while, took the anonymous chat record out of the drawer and then put it back, ultimately never mentioning it to anyone. Once a move is made, there is no need to overturn the board. 3 months later, David's company was facing a tight cash flow after losing several major orders in a row, and it was said he was running to the bank every day. Howard left the alumni group chat and stopped posting. When someone occasionally mentioned him, they only said that he seemed to have gone out of town to work on a project with his father. The day of the proposal wasn't anything special. It was just an ordinary Saturday. Liam said he wanted to take Emma somewhere. After driving for 40 minutes, they arrived at the edge of a construction site on the outskirts of the city. Emma looked confused as she got out of the car. "You brought me to see a construction site?" "Yeah." Liam led her around the barricade and walked into an open space inside. Scaffolding was still up at the site, but the outline was already visible. It was a small building under construction. It wasn't large, but the structure was beautiful. "What is this?" Emma asked. "A piece of land I bought," Liam said. "Not big, but the location is decent. I plan to build a building, put a small flower shop on the ground floor, and live upstairs." Emma stared at him blankly. "A flower shop? Didn't you say that you wanted to open a flower shop when you were little?" That was back when they had first met. Once, while chatting in the cafeteria, Emma had mentioned it in passing. "I wanted to open a flower shop when I was little, but then I realized flower shops don't make money, so I gave up on the idea." She had almost forgotten about it herself, but he remembered. Emma stood on the unfinished vacant lot, the wind messing up her hair. She raised a hand to cover her mouth, her eyes rimmed with red. Liam took a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, not large, but the diamond was shaped like a tiny flower petal. "The flower shop isn't finished yet, but the ring is ready first." He looked at her, his voice steady, though the fingertips holding the box were turning white. "Emma, will you open this flower shop with me?" Emma's tears fell. She sniffled, wiped her face haphazardly with her sleeve, then nodding hard, her ponytail swaying with the motion. Liam slipped that petal-shaped ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. His hands trembled slightly as he lowered his head to put it on. And Emma saw it, laughing through her tears. "Why are your hands shaking? I was afraid you wouldn't say yes. I'm crying like this and it still doesn't count as a yes?" He raised his head, and the two stood face to face on the wasteland, surrounded by reinforced concrete and the weeds that had just sprouted with the arrival of spring. Neither of them found this place ugly. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead, saying, "Let's go home then. The design for the flower shop is on my computer. I've actually revised it 4 times. Emma took his arm, her eyes still red but smiling. "When did you start preparing for this?" "From that night by the river when I said I liked you." "You had it all planned back then?" "No," he said honestly. "But I thought about it a lot later on. It was only finalized recently." Emma leaned on his shoulder and took a few steps, then suddenly said, "Liam, you really are. Someone who does big things quietly." She hopped over a broken brick. "But I like it." The wind on the construction site was strong. The smell of cement mixed with the fishy scent of spring grass, which wasn't exactly pleasant. But as they walked out arm in arm, a bulldozer driver by the roadside glanced at them and, for no apparent reason, grinned along with them. Liam stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of his new office, watching the city transition from dusk to night as the lights of thousands of homes flickered on one after another. On the desk behind him sat a plump succulent, the one Emma had brought, looking full of life. He picked up his phone, snapped a photo of the night view outside the window, and sent it to Emma. "Nice, isn't it?" She replied, "Nice, but not as nice as that succulent in the office." Liam smiled at the words, put his phone back in his pocket, and turned to organize the documents on his desk. There was a new negotiation to prepare for tomorrow, but he didn't feel tired. The wedding was held on the lawn behind the Liu residence. It was not extravagant, but quite a few people attended, old connections of the Liu family from several generations, core executives of the group, and a few friends from Liam's university days. His mother wore a dark red cheapao, her hair neatly coiled. Her eyes had been red since morning, yet she never let the tears fall. George served as the officiant, having switched to a lighter cane, though his voice remained as booming as ever. After finishing the vows, he patted Liam on the shoulder, said nothing superfluous, and as he turned to walk back to his seat at the head table, he secretly wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. Emma looked a bit silly in her white wedding dress, smiling broadly. When they exchanged rings, her hands shook so much that it took ages to get them on, drawing laughter from the guests below. As Liam lowered his head to help her slide the ring on, he heard her whisper, I'm done for. I need to practice putting on rings 100 times. "No rush," Liam said. "You can practice once a day from now on." Applause broke out from the audience, and just then, sunlight streamed through the clouds, bathing the entire lawn in gold. On the outskirts of the crowd, a figure in a gray trench coat stood far outside the fence. Fiona hadn't gone in. From across the lawn and the crowd, she watched the figure in a suit slide a ring onto another girl's finger. She clutched the old red velvet box in her hand, her fingernails unconsciously picking at the corners. The velvet surface had been worn so much it was turning white. She stood there for about 10 minutes, then turned and left. When she reached the bus stop, she lowered her head to glance at the box. She opened it, and the silver chain inside glinted in the sunlight. She snapped the lid shut and put it back in her pocket. She didn't throw it away, nor did she clutch it in her palm again. She just let it rest quietly in the inner pocket of her coat, like a small mark that would neither be opened again nor discarded. That white BMW hadn't been parked downstairs for a long time. After moving out, Fiona rented a small apartment and found an administrative position at an ordinary company. The pay wasn't high, but it was enough to cover rent and food. Every morning while squeezing onto the subway, she would occasionally think back to the days of sitting in the BMW applying lipstick, but those scenes felt like someone else's memory, viewed through a layer of fog, no longer quite real. Howard didn't come to the wedding. He had gone out of town with his father, supposedly working on a very small project. After he left the alumni group, only a very small number of people still kept in touch with him. Occasional news trickled out that he had lost quite a bit of weight and spoke much less. Liam stood at the edge of the lawn, gazing at the empty corner beyond the distant fence, saying nothing. Emma walked over and took his arm. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing." He withdrew his gaze and smiled. "Let's go. Mom is calling us over for photos." The sunlight was lovely, and the music on the lawn changed to a more upbeat tune. With Emma's hand in his, Liam walked toward his mother and grandfather, with the laughter and blessings of the guests behind him and an open road ahead. He didn't walk particularly fast, but every step was steady.